Well, good day, folks. I'm back for another presentation on The Secret by Byron Price. The Secret Solve is a series where I go through the book and I look at the various images and try to determine what the authors and artists were thinking when they put together the book The Secret by Byron Price. And in today's episode, we are going to talk about Mira Chimera on the wall. Who's the fairest of them all? Well, of course, it's Snow and the Seven Dwarfs, of which that line comes from. And the Seven Dwarfs was basically a Grimm's fairy tale that our friend Walt Disney decided to make into a movie. And Walt Disney, we've talked about our friend Walt Disney before, and I'm going to let you go back and revisit Walt Disney and what potential connections there could be to that. But Snow White premiered at the Cathay Circle Theater in Los Angeles, California in December 21st of 1937. Despite initial doubts from the film industry, it was critical and commercial success. It earned more than $8 million during its initial release. And so the plot is basically having lost both of her parents at a young age, Snow White is a princess living with her wicked and cold-hearted stepmother, the Queen. Fearing that Snow White's beauty will outshine her own, the Queen forces her to work as a scullery maid and asks her magic mirror daily, who is the fairest of all? For years, the mirror always answered that the Queen is, pleasing her. Okay, well, I'm not going to continue to tell you the whole story of how the Snow White is. And in the 1980s, Snow White on the mirror might be a cocaine reference. And so all this about Snow White and the Queen and the mirror and all this might just be, silly. But anyway, there's the Seven Dwarfs, and they all have their different names. And but the original Walt Disney production, again, gets us to Walt Disney again. And the Queen in this particular production was played by a Lucille. How many times do we run into a Lucy in The Secret? But Lucille Laverne played the role of the voice of the Queen, the evil Queen, which is Snow White's wicked stepmother, in 1937. And this lady was born in Nashville, Tennessee. She died in Culver City, California. She wasn't in that many productions, but Lucille Laverne Mitchum. And I don't know, it seems like she might have retired shortly after. The voiceover work for Snow White was played by Adriana Alina Loretta Castellati. Man, that's a lot of work right there, isn't it? So she was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and an Italian-American father. Her father immigrated from Udine and worked as a music teacher. And her mother, Maria Josephine Orifice Castellati, was from Casa Vittor, was a singer in the Royal Opera Theater of Rome. Okay. Her sister sang opera. So anyway, she started as a singer at MGM. Walt Disney hired her as a voice of Snow White. And she was in some other films after that. She ended up getting married like 4 times. And so she basically is a Disney legend. She died in Los Angeles in 1997. Wow, she lived to 80 years old. Anyway, so there's the original Snow White and the reference to Snow White and the two potential, I guess, 3 potential connections to Snow White in this. So when we get towards the end of this Mira Chimera on the wall, in the spotter's tips, it talks about Bernice bobbed her hair. And you might just have glossed over this Bernice bobbed her hair thing, but Bernice bobs her hair is a short story by F. Scott Fitzgerald. It was first published May in 1920 in the Saturday Evening Post. The original publication was illustrated by Mary Wilson Preston. The work later appeared in the September 1920 collection of Flappers and Philosophers. I guess that was it's a collection of F. Scott Fitzgerald's work. Anyway, so this story is about the plight of a mixed race Native American girl named Bernice from rural Eau Claire, Wisconsin, who visits her beautiful and sophisticated white cousin Marjorie in the city. I assume it's New York City because that's kind of where, F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote some of his things. Decades after its public, okay, well, we don't need to know in an attempt to be popular, Bernice announces she will bob her hair. But this announcement leads to unforeseen consequences. So the character Bernice is a reference to Berenice II of Egypt. And Berenice II Euergetes of Europe was queen regnant of Cyrenaica from a certain period of time. And she was the queen of Ptolemaic Egypt from Ptolemy the Third. All this Ptolemy stuff comes into play. Well, isn't that Greek stuff? Probably is. It's all Greek to me. So the story then, if you look at on the Wikipedia of this, and you look at Bernice Bob's Her Hair illustrations by Mary Wilson Preston, May of 1920, that image is of a woman in a chair by a mirror. And in the earlier Mira Chimera, the one that wasn't by the wall, by the way, but was just, it kind of looks familiar if you look at that image compared to the image in the book. And so this whole Indian woman thing, mixed race, popularity, changing hairstyles, flappers, adapting, etc. Julie Harris starred in the 1951 television adaptation, and Shelley Duvall starred in the later 1976 adaptation of this particular one-act play. So I think when you get down to the actors and actresses, it might be a little far out, but maybe we're just talking about hairstyles and the changing hairstyles and all of that. So we talked about Snow White. Let's see, who else do we have? Well, I'm going to do the easy ones first. So in the area where it talks about, hair and the loss of hair and the double toupee and all of this, I was wondering if they were talking about Cy Sperling. Cy or Seymour Sperling was the guy that invented the hair club for men. And the hair club for men, the toupee, if you will, he kind of came in right there in 1980 and 81 with his hair club for men. And he has some reference to Boca Raton, Florida, is where he passed on. He was the king of late night. He kind of made some appearances. And I think, he hadn't really fully matured his hair product stuff. It was just kind of getting started in the 80s. And so I don't know. I'm not going to put a whole lot of into old Cy Sperling, but I just mentioned him and the hair club for men. But I think the baldness has to do with the Rockefeller family. And specifically, since we found one of the Rockefellers park to be important to the Cleveland solve, I think this all has to do with the baldness, the pattern baldness in the Rockefellers family. And so I chalk up the mentioning of the bald-headedness. The fantasy often leads to a diabolical infatuation with the double toupee, because I think almost every single one of those ended up, wearing, if you can look at all of the, if you want to look at a really bad toupee, You can look at the Wikipedia for Winthrop Paul Wynne Rockefeller. He was the 17th Lieutenant Governor of Arkansas in 1996, but he was born in 48. And if you want to look at another bad, uh, his parents were Guinevere Bobo Paclute and Barbara Bobo Sears Rockefeller, also known as Eva Paul, is an American actress. Bobo was born in 1916 in Lithuania. She spent her childhood in Chicago. Later, her family moved to Indiana. She became Miss Lithuania at age 17, and then she went to Northwestern University. Um, she was the third secretary at the U.S. Embassy in Paris. She was also featured on Time magazine's cover. She married Winthrop Rockefeller in 1948. I'm just going way too far into this. Lawrence Rockefeller was the best man, and Isabel Paul was the maid of honor. Okay, you didn't need to know all that, but I just enjoy talking about the Rockefellers because they're like, and Bobo. I mean, who can pass up an opportunity to talk about a Bobo, if you will? All right. Okay, so we've had some fun talking about possible Mira chimeras, and I want to back up a little bit and talk about the Dukes. So in my last episode, when we were talking about the uh, alibi elf and the smoking and the cigarettes, and at the end of that one, I alluded to the fact that maybe we just need to look up the American Tobacco Company, and in fact, maybe that is really where we should have started with that last one. So there's a statue of James B. Duke on the West Campus quad where he's got a arm extended. Anyway, never mind. He left money to Duke University. He had all these different houses, and he was known by the nickname Buck, uh, and he was Durham, North Carolina, Duke University. You can read some more about him and his personal life, but most of the interesting parts of this come from his relationship with James Leal Greenleaf, a member of the firm Frederick Law Olmsted. Oh, hold on. Who's this Frederick Law Olmsted that you guys are so infatuated with? You guys like Olmsted a lot. Some of you people in the secret. Well, here is we're talking about Doris Duke. This is his daughter, Doris Duke. She was born November 22nd, 1912. And Doris was raised at Duke Farms, located in Hillsborough, New Jersey, where her father had worked with landscapers such as Frederick Law Olmsted. And they transformed this 2,000 acres into an extraordinary landscape. Okay, well, so there's the possible connection for you people that like Mr. Olmsted and his parks. But Doris Duke, I think, is the jumping off part, because maybe the Mira Chimera on the wall is actually just Doris Duke. And considering that we had the alibi elf above this pantyhose ripping monster with the platform shoes and all that, and now we're introducing you to the Mira Chimera, maybe we just need to be looking at this Mira Chimera as being Doris Duke. Doris Duke at one time was considered to be the wealthiest debutante in the United States. Her father left her a fortune. She was born in New York. And she passed away in Beverly Hills in 1993. So here again is Byron Price predicting the secret future events. When she turned 18 in 1930, the 6 foot tall Duke was presented at a ball at Rough Point, the family residence in Newport, Rhode Island. She became When her mother died in 1962, her mother left her not much, just jewelry, a coat, and additional 250 million. Yeah, yeah, there you go. So Duke went and she studied under some voice coaching. And she then went to, during World War II, she worked in a canteen for sailors in Egypt. And she only took $1 a year for this effort. Again, we're talking about one of the wealthiest women in America, volunteering and going during World War II to Egypt. She then had a couple of affairs with some people and married a couple of times and had homes in Hillsborough Township, Newport, Rhode Island, Shangri-La, excuse me, in Honolulu, Falcon Lair in Beverly Hills, California, uh, which was once Rudolph Valentino's home, by the way. She had 2 apartments in Manhattan. She had another apartment near Times Square, where basically she owned her own Boeing 737 jet. Uh, so I guess when you're that wealthy, you can have all of these things. Okay, so probably the thing that brings Doris Duke into the uh, lampooning area is because of the death of Eduardo Torella. In 1966, he was the curator of Duke's art, you know, uh, collection, and he had done this for like a decade. And he wanted to go to out to Hollywood and become a production designer. And so they had an argument, and Edward Torella had rented a Dodge Polara. And upon leaving, he somehow found himself underneath the car in a pinned position and subsequently passed away. Well, this was probably the trial of the 60s, because obviously the Torella family sued for wrongful death because obviously you died on the property of the wealthiest person in the world, and or in the United States at that time, one of them, and so you sue. The Torellas got a settlement. Later, they've investigated the thing, and came to the conclusion that, well, she might have just drove over him, you know. But anyway, the last line in this thing says that, but her dedicated followers sometimes glimpse her still reflected, if only for a moment, in the smoked windows of a passing limo. Yeah, somebody got smoked. All right, so smoked. Where did Doris Duke's money come from? Smoke. Okay. The guys that wrote this really were very, very creative and good at piling in just the jabs if they could, you know, and smoked out windows of a car. Yeah, we didn't see Doris drive over old Torella. No, it didn't happen that way. Um, so she had a huge net worth when she actually died. She had invested in Picasso, Van Gogh, General Motors stock, etc. She died at Falcon Lair in 1983. Well, that happened after the secret. But the interesting part is that she reportedly had numerous love affairs. Among those were surfing pioneer Duke Kamehameha, Kamua, whatever, film actor Errol Flynn, and British politician Alec Cunningham Reid, and the U.S. Army General George S. Patton. Oh, Doris Duke had an affair with General George S. Patton, and we talked about the gin rummy earlier, and then we talked about let's see, the other general, and she had stock in General Motors, had the alibi off. It was talking about a general that led the British. Oh, what's it say on alibi off? We're talking about the Revolutionary War, and a general that lost the first conflict. Oh, and then earlier we talked about Xenophone, and we talked. Oh, how many times do we have a general mentioned? Secret. Oh, we have General Electric later, and General Motors. It's all because they're building the case for the general U.S. Army General Patton, and it all leads up to the solve that is at Louisville. Well, not Louisville, Fort Knox. Anyway, so I'd probably beat the Doris Duke to death by now. But let's just, so we talked about James Buchanan Duke. So from one Duke to another, and I'm not going to Duke Ellington, although we might. I'm going to go to Anna Marie Patty Duke because she was an American actress and mental health advocate, and she was born at Bellevue Hospital in Manhattan, the youngest of three children to Frances Margaret McMahon, a cashier, and John Patrick Duke, a handyman and cab driver of Irish descent. Well, basically, that was actually what, isn't it ironic though, that well, never mind. So Duke spent her life as in the Elmhurst neighborhood of Queens. So since we're talking about Queens, in the Mira Chimera, right? I'm just going to hop off of that idea and say, hey, maybe we need to look at another, the neighborhood of Queens and Patty Duke. Anyway, so I'm not going to spend much time on Patty Duke, but she got her start in the television adaptation of Meet Me in St. Louis as Toothy Smith. The role that had originated in the film vision by Margaret O'Brien. So I just love these little connections between people. In 1959 we get the start of the career of Patty Duke. Where she appeared in Meet Me in St. Louis. Okay, well I'm not gonna too. She had her own show, the Patty Duke Show. So you can look up more about Patty Duke if you like, but I just had to go from one Duke to the other. The other thing about The Miracle Worker is the 1962 film, and she played a role in the Helen Keller production. And so you've got Helen Keller. She's also a player in the scandal involving the $64,000 question, in which she won $32,000. So she has some other connections to things that happen in the world of television and history events that the writers would like. But anyway, so that's a little bit about Patty Duke. So the pantyhose, or the hose in the image on page, 128, are being pulled by this mischievous fairy or whatever it is. And I don't know, I kind of looked into this, and the Legs Pantyhose Company, or Legs, is a brand of pantyhose, and it was introduced in '69 by Hanes. And it mentioned earlier, it says where all the extremities are painted fire engine red. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I still haven't solved that little announcement in the back of the book about something where all the extremities were painted fire engine red. I'm sure there's a reference in here, but let's just look at the Hanes Company. Hanes is basically a company that is based out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I remember Winston was a cigarette brand and Salem was a cigarette brand. And this particular pantyhose appears right under the Alibi Elf section, even though it's written to be part of the Mira Chimera. So I'm just wondering here if is the Mira Chimera and the Alibi Elf related through the pantyhose pull? And what we're really talking about is in North Carolina, and we're talking about Winston-Salem, cigarette companies, and then we're talking about the hose or hosiery being pulled. I don't know. The interesting part about legs is that earlier in the book we talked about the checkout line at the grocery store, and the way in which legs pantyhose was marketed was that instead of having them in the regular section of the women's hosiery department, they often did a display in front of the point of purchase impulse item line at the store. So the traditional marketing of pantyhose being in the hosiery section was turned upside down in 1971 when Hanes, through their Legs brand of hosiery, started selling them at the checkout aisle in a standalone display. And so by 1977, Legs had captured 15% of the total U.S. hosiery market, and Legs carried 38% of hosiery sold in drug and food stores in the U.S. in 1977. So the other reason they would have put this in here is because of the ears in the Chicago image having to do with Jackson and the petticoat affair. And so again, more indication of how that works. So there's the Legs pantyhose and the pantyhose pull in the image and why it's included in there. The shoe that you're looking at could possibly be a Moshe Morris Kimmel shoe, which was the guy who kind of put out the first platform shoe. And he has a relationship or made a shoe for Marlene Dietrich. So Kimmel was a Jewish person who escaped Berlin, Germany, and settled in the United States with his family in 1939 and opened the Kimmel Shoe Factory in Los Angeles. So I don't know if the authors are trying to point us to the first platform shoe manufacturer who opened up, a factory in Los Angeles, or whether they're trying to point you to Salvador Ferragamo, who also kind of increased the interest in the modern platform shoe. He made a sandal for Judy Garland, and then, the Wizard of Oz, and this shoe was named the Rainbow Shoe. But Ferragamo went on to develop the stiletto heel, a number of different types of shoe designs. Marilyn Monroe, Salvador shoes were the symbol of Italy's renovation. He made many inventions, like the stiletto heel, which was worn by Marilyn Monroe, the gold sandals, etc. The invisible sandals, which won the Neiman Marcus Award in 1947. And so you get to Marilyn Monroe and her appearing in Ferragamo shoes. And this isn't the actual Ferragamo shoe that Marilyn Monroe is pictured with. This is more of a platform shoe. And so I think it might be more of the Kimmel reference. But if you look at some of the other shoes that Mary Pickford, not Douglas Fairbanks, but Gloria Swanson, and some of the early shoe photographs of Ferragamo's shoes, some of them are have this sandal slash platform type of design. And so I think this is either the Ferragamo shoe or the other one. The interesting part about Ferragamo is that he started working for a famous footwear company in Boston at the age of 14 before moving to Santa Barbara, California, and Beverly Hills. And so Ferragamo also gets you some referencing back to the Boston Saul. And in fact, he started a cowboy boot factory in Boston. Um, and I didn't even know Boston was known for such things as cowboy boots. But anyway, I think it's probably Ferragamo. Uh, and by the way, the platform sandal or the sandal has origins in Greek, in Greece. Uh, you can follow Ferragamo to you know, an India reference and Evita, and Don't Cry for Me, Argentina, and you can go down that whole entire rabbit hole. But it wouldn't be the first time you would go to India, because remember, that was an Indian that was from the book by F. Scott Fitzgerald that was referenced when they talked about Bernice bobbing her hair. So there's two references in the Mira, Chimera on the wall to India or to Indian uh, references. And there's that. Well, I kind of thought maybe this image, this was that since this Kimmel guy made shoes for Marlene Dietrich, I thought maybe our Mira Chimera on the wall could be uh, uh, Marlene Dietrich. And I don't know why I thought that, but it came to mind. And maybe because she was in some silent films, and it mentions at the end some silent films. And so she basically started 1920s Berlin. Dietrich performed on the stage in silent film. She was born in 1901. She lived to be 91. She passed away in 1992. So her real name is Marie Magdalene Marlene Dietrich. And in the Mira Chimera, we're talking about an extinct person who then rises again. And if her real name is Maria Magdalene, well, Marie Magdalene or Mary Magdalene is famously the woman who accompanied Jesus and was a witness to the crucifixion. So I draw my potential Marlene Dietrich to this based upon the fact that her real name is Maria Magdalene Marlene. And The Devil is a Woman was one of the things that she was in early on. Blue Angel, Morocco, which was the only film she got an Academy Award for. Marlene Dietrich has great reference to this whole India, the Scarlet Empress. The Scarlet Empress. Holy shit! I think the San Francisco might be at the Empress Chinese restaurant, and here she played in the Scarlet Empress in 1934. So, and it's a historical drama about the life of Catherine the Great. And Catherine the Great, well, where does that get us? Oh boy, maybe it really is Marlene Dietrich, because she has this double reference too. Well, anyway, she's known for humanitarian efforts during World War II. I know. I just kind of like the possibility of this being Marlene Dietrich having a reference here. But anyway, The Garden of Allah is another film she was in. She worked with David O. Selznick, which you'll find him come up a number of different times in the genre here. She worked at the Hollywood Canteen with Rita Hayworth. She was awarded the Medal of Freedom. From the 1950s until the mid 1970s, she worked most exclusively as a cabaret artist, performing in large theaters in the major cities worldwide. She was paid $30,000 a week to appear live at the Sahara Hotel in the Las Vegas Strip. I've kind of alluded to the possibility of a reference there. The show was short, consisting only of a few songs associated with her. Her daringly sheer nude dress, a heavily beaded evening gown of silk, which gave the illusion of transparency, designed by Jean Lewis, attracted a lot of publicity. She was then on to Paris, and then she returned to Las Vegas, where her contracts were renewed for some more performances. Well, the sheer stocking in this image may have more information if you link it to Marlena Dietrich and her performer's outfit, if you will, in the Mira Chimera. So I think maybe Dietrich possibly was a chain smoker too. I don't know. I can't remember. Some of these stars, I think she might have been a smoker too. She declined. She had cancer though in 65. So I don't know. I think Marlena Dietrich might have something to do with this one, and I don't know. I'm not willing to quite go there yet, but I don't know. Norma Jean Mortensen, June 1st, 1926, born at the Los Angeles General Hospital. Her mother was Gladys Pearl Baker, who was born in Piedras Negras, Coachella, Mexico, to a poor Midwestern family who migrated to California at the turn of the century. Gladys married John Newton Baker, and they had an abusive relationship, and he was older. They had 2 children, Robert and Bernice. Remember, we had Bernice bobbed her hair, right? So I'm talking about Marilyn Monroe. And I could go on for 30 more minutes talking about, Marilyn Monroe, Pearl Harbor, if it's truly her, all of the things that could go into this. And this whole Bernice might just be, when Bernice bobbed her hair reference, might be just trying to point you to Marilyn Monroe. And if that's the case, there is a lot to unpack. Because, basically, she was, wasn't she in a bunch of movies? And then there's the whole not cocaine, but the marriage to DiMaggio at San Francisco City Hall. Then there's the whole DiMaggio thing. And, there's the famous Monroe posing in the 7-year itch of her pantyhose. Oh, maybe she don't even have pantyhose on in that image, but her dress blowing up. And, there's the ruffled bottom there's the ruffle on the bottom of the dress here. And if you look at the shoe that Marilyn Monroe is wearing in the famous 7-year itch, it's a white strapped open toe heel platform shoe. And it's a different color, obviously, but it's a strapped open toed heel shoe, and the ruffle fringe on the bottom of the dress, maybe that's in Morse code, and maybe that code spells out Marilyn Monroe. I don't know. But what all I'm getting at is you have a woman in a white dress and a pair of this type of shoes, and you have another woman in, you know, in this. Um, and so I don't know if Marilyn Monroe perfected the phrase, "How do I look from the back?" Um, but I just, there's so much to unpack with Marilyn Monroe. There's so much to unpack. But I got to get on with it. I got to get going. So if you like Marilyn Monroe's possible connections to this, uh, you know, read through or use your knowledge of Marilyn Monroe to make more inferences. Because I got one more place to go. I want to go to the all electric kitchen. I'm going to go to the all electric kitchen because it's mentioned. I think all electric kitchen is a direct reference to General Electric Theater, because the General Electric Theater was an American anthology series hosted by Ronald Reagan that was broadcast on CBS radio and television. The series was sponsored by General Electric's Department of Public Relations. General Electric made kitchen appliances, among other things, and the list of people that were involved in being on this show. But the key central character is Ronald Reagan. Okay, in 1981, the writers of National Lampoon magazine had a fascination with Nancy Reagan's diary. And in fact, they wrote no more than probably 20 different stories in National Lampoon over the year about Nancy Reagan's diaries. And so Ronald Reagan was definitely on the radar screen of the people at National Lampoon. I'm not going to hold up every single one of those stories that are in National Lampoon magazine, which I have sitting by my desk, by the way, and have read through. But I'm just saying that we introduced Ronald Reagan, and Ronald Reagan is another connection to this California area. And specifically, you get into an interesting story about Reagan being fired by General Electric. So here we go. He's cruising along. Ronald Reagan's happy. He's in Hollywood. He's making movies. He's got this General Electric thing going for him. And then, lo and behold, who becomes president, or who becomes the Attorney General of the United States, but Robert F. Kennedy. And as is contended by a number of people, the Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy pressured General Electric to cancel the General Electric Theater, at least to fire Reagan as the host if the program were to continue. The series was not dropped because of low ratings, but political intervention. Robert Kennedy told GE officials that the company would receive no federal contracts so long as Reagan was host of the series. His father's dismissal propelled Reagan into a political career, and 18 years later, Reagan would take the oath of office as the oldest person to become U.S. president. Well, I mean, there are debates as to whether Joe Biden is really alive or a zombie, but Biden now is actually the oldest to take the oath of office in 2020. And so, had Kennedy stayed out of the GE contract matters, likely there would have been no governor or President Reagan. So I just think that if you look at that as the all electric kitchen reference, again, we're drawn into political aspects of the secret again. Okay, General Electric Theater, 50 Years of the Pantyhose, Platform Shoes, Ferragamo, Mary Magdalene. I think I've about covered it. All right, folks. I think that brings me to the conclusion of this episode, where the Mira Chimera can lead you to Ronald Reagan. It can lead you to Marilyn Monroe. It can lead you to Doris Duke. It can lead you a number of different places. The final months, Monroe lived at 12305 Fifth Helena Drive in Hollywood neighborhood of Los Angeles. Her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, was staying overnight at the home on the evening of August 4th. There's a big story in here about the washing machine in Marilyn Monroe's house. And there's a woman in the back of the book coming out of a washing machine. I don't know if the depravity goes so far as to have looked at the autopsy and or the explanation of what Eunice Murray was doing when she found Marilyn Monroe unresponsive. And I don't know if they would have put Marilyn Monroe coming out of a washing machine, but people can look that up for their own interesting investigation. So if you look at Jean Harlow in the 1930s, there was also her. She also wore some of these Ferragamo type shoes as well. All right, folks, that's it. I'm done with this one. I think you can go a number of different ways with this. As you know, Marilyn Monroe was a pitch person, did a lot of advertising, so she could be the General Electric connection. She could also be the Luster Cream shampoo connection. She could be the Bernice bobs her hair connection. Honestly, the Mira Chimera on the wall, we do not know who is the fairest of them all. It could be just the queen himself. Maybe they're just making a reference to the Queen, Elton John. Oh, well, that was a lot to unpack. Well, folks, I'm going to check to see if anybody joined in. Nobody joined in today for this 47-minute long presentation. Apologize for the length, but there was so much to unpack when it comes to the Mira Chimera, from Doris Duke to Patty Duke. Oh, yeah, Patty Duke, by the way. Oh, I think Patty Duke and Ronald Reagan have history together. And if General Electric is, oh, wow, there's more to that tangent, isn't there? One of these days, I'm just going to go jump off the Hollywood sign, get it over with. Oh, not me personally jump off the Hollywood sign, but I'm just going to go to where the person jumped off the Hollywood sign. Because I'm starting to think that perhaps, with all these references to Hollywood, Byron Price literally went to the Hollywood sign and picked a letter, as if he was appearing on Wheel of Fortune, and it was just he picked a letter on the Hollywood sign, and put it somewhere. Because there's radio tower right next to the Hollywood sign, and don't get me going on the radio tower and how many times it's mentioned in the back of the book. Oh, geez, I'm pretty sure there's one next to some sort of tower of some sort. But anyway, all right, folks. I've talked about Norma Jean Baker and Marilyn Monroe, the Vivaldi Rockefellers, the shoes. I think I about got it all covered. But there is a lot in that image, folks. Or in that story and image. All right, I'll be back after lunch. I'm going to do one more or two of these today. It's kind of crappy out. And we'll talk about the lepra con man. Oh, somebody that's a con man. The leprechaun man. And they're Irish. I wonder if they're Irish Catholic people. I wonder if they're Irish Catholic people with the last name Kennedy. All right, folks, I'm moving on. Have a good day. I'll be back later.